Chris never liked space stations. Too many wires, too many blinking lights, and not enough windows. He was an engineer, sure, but he liked planets, dirt under his boots, and real air, still. The pay was good, and after his last job on Mars, he needed something quiet. The quiet part ended 2 weeks after he arrived on Orbit 7, a research station above a small moon. The station was shared by humans and a few alien species, peaceful, cooperative, and boring until the Vaari came aboard. The Vaari were strange, tall, smooth-skinned, and glowing faintly along their arms and face. Their voices were soft, their eyes always watching. They barely spoke. Chris was told they communicated mostly through energy patterns and feelings. He didn't really get it, but he didn't try to understand. He had repairs to do and wires to check. Zairi, the Vaari woman, assigned to engineering observation, didn't talk much. She just watched him work, her bright silver eyes following his every move. Sometimes she stood so close he could feel the warmth from her skin. It was a bit unnerving, but she never got in the way, so he let her be. One night, after a long 12-hour shift fixing coolant leaks in the lower deck, Chris dragged himself into the sleeping pod. The pods were small, just enough room to lie down. He pulled off his boots, yawned, and dropped onto the soft pad. The lights dimmed automatically. Finally, rest. Just as his eyes closed, he heard the softness of the pod door sliding open. He sat up fast, his heart jumping. A figure entered slowly, tall, glowing faintly. Zeri. Hello? Chris said, confused. She didn't answer. She simply stepped forward, bent down, and gently lay next to him, not near him, next to him, like she belonged there. Wait, Zeri, this is my pod. His voice was nervous now. He sat back, unsure what to do. She closed her eyes and let out a soft breath, like a sigh. She seemed calm, peaceful. Not even looking at him. You can't just climb in like that, Chris whispered. No reply. He didn't know if she understood. He thought about calling security, but she wasn't doing anything dangerous, just sleeping, still. It was weird. After a few minutes of silence, Chris lay back down, careful not to touch her. He stared at the ceiling of the pod, wide awake. This was not how he expected his night to go. By morning, she was gone. The pod door had opened and closed while he slept, but he hadn't noticed. He stepped into the hallway, still half asleep, rubbing his eyes. At breakfast, one of the alien technicians, a four-eyed creature named Ro, looked at him and chuckled. You look like someone shared their sleep. Chris blinked. What? Vaari custom. Sleep beside the one they feel safest with. Chris nearly dropped his coffee. What? No. She just came in. No warning. Didn't ask. Rel laughed again. Then you've been chosen. He didn't find it funny. The rest of the day, Chris kept glancing over his shoulder, wondering if Zeri would pop up again. She didn't. She stayed on the far side of the lab, watching as usual, quiet as a shadow. That night, Chris braced himself before entering his pod. He even locked the door, just to be sure. It felt silly, but he wanted sleep alone. But part of him didn't feel afraid, just confused. The third night, the door opened again. He didn't lock it this time. And again, Zeri entered, silent, calm. She didn't ask. She just curled up beside him and closed her eyes. He whispered, Why? Are you doing this? But she only gave a soft hum, like she was already asleep. Chris sighed, staring at the ceiling. Maybe she really did feel safe around him. Maybe that wasn't such a bad thing. Chris spent the next day thinking about Zaira. He tried to stay focused on his repair tasks, but his mind kept drifting. He didn't understand her. She barely spoke. Yet, every night now, she came into his pod and slept beside him like it was normal. No one else on the station thought it was strange when he asked one of the older human crew members about it. The man just shrugged. Vaari don't explain their ways. If she chose you, there's a reason. Don't take it lightly. I didn't choose anything, Chris muttered. Maybe not, the man replied, but she did. That made Chris even more confused. Later, in the lab, Zeri followed him again. She didn't say anything. She didn't touch anything. She just stood near him, sometimes moving quietly to hand him tools before he even asked. It was like she knew what he needed before he said a word. He glanced at her. "Do you even understand me?" Zeri tilted her head, eyes calm. She blinked, slowly, like she was listening. "This whole sleeping thing," he rubbed the back of his neck. "Is that a friendship thing? A protection thing? What are we even doing?" She didn't answer. Instead, she walked over to his side, held out her hand, and gently placed a small stone in his palm. It was smooth and warm, glowing softly with pulsing blue light. "Safe," she said softly. It was the first English word she had spoken to him. His heart beat faster. "Safe?" He repeated. She nodded once. Then she returned to her quiet place near the tool shelf and said no more. Chris didn't know what to do with that. He held the stone all day, feeling its quiet warmth. That night, he waited in the hallway before going to his pod. A few crew members passed by and gave him a knowing smile, like they understood something he didn't. He shook his head, still not used to any of this. When he opened his pod, it was empty. For a moment, he felt disappointed. But 10 minutes later, the door hissed open, and Zeri stepped inside again. She moved gently, lay down, and closed her eyes. No words, no questions. He looked at her, unsure if he should ask anything. In the dim light of the pod, her glowing skin looked like starlight, peaceful, calm. "You really trust me, don't you?" he whispered. Her eyes stayed closed, but she gave a soft hum, like a quiet yes. He sighed and lay down, keeping his distance. He had so many questions. Why him? What did this mean to her? Did she do this with anyone else before? Or was this something special? But no answers came. The next morning, Chris found himself waking up with her hand gently resting on his arm. It wasn't tight. It wasn't holding him down. It was just there, like she needed to know he was still beside her. When she left, he stared at the ceiling for a long time. Later, during a break in the mess hall, he connected his data pad to the station's library. He started searching everything he could about the Veyari, especially their customs. What he found surprised him. The Veyari rarely touched others, even among their own kind. Physical closeness was rare. Sleeping beside someone was an act of deep trust. It was more than friendship. It was a connection, a bond. They didn't form families like humans did. They didn't date or pair off for fun. They bonded when they found someone whose energy made them feel balanced and safe. That word again, safe. Chris leaned back in his seat. The glowing stone in his pocket pulsed quietly. He wasn't sure if he was ready for something this deep, but he also didn't want to hurt her. She hadn't done anything wrong. She wasn't scary or pushy. She was quiet, thoughtful, strange, but never harmful. He sighed. "This is above my pay grade," he mumbled to himself. That evening, when he entered the lab, Zeri was already there, cleaning tools. She glanced at him, then looked down again. No words. He walked over, pulled the small stone from his pocket, and placed it on the table next to her. "I kept it," he said. "I didn't throw it away." She looked at the stone, then at him. Then she smiled. It was small, barely there, but it was real. And it made something inside Chris soften. That night, when they both lay silently in the pod, Chris didn't keep his distance anymore. He let his shoulder rest lightly against hers. It was quiet. And for the first time in a long while, he slept peacefully. The next few days passed in quiet routine. Chris went to the lab, did his repair work, and Zeri followed him like a shadow. She didn't speak often, but she didn't need to. She handed him tools before he even asked. She watched his work closely and sometimes pointed out small problems without saying a word. Just a quiet hum or a gentle tap. Chris started getting used to her presence. He still didn't understand everything, but it felt less strange now. It felt comfortable. Every night, she came into his sleeping pod without asking. Every night, she lay down beside him and closed her eyes like it was the most normal thing in the world. Chris no longer flinched when she entered. He even left a small spot open beside him without thinking. She never touched him too much. Just once in a while, her hand would rest on his arm or her shoulder would lean gently against his. Her warmth helped him sleep better than he had in weeks. One evening, after a quiet meal, Chris sat alone in the observation room. The stars outside looked beautiful. He heard soft steps behind him. He didn't have to turn, he already knew it. Was Zeri. She sat beside him, her glow faint but calming. He glanced at her. "Can I ask you something?" Zeri tilted her head. "Why me?" Chris asked. "There are lots of people on this station, but you chose to be close to me. Why?" She was quiet for a long moment. Then she placed her hand over her chest, where her heart was, and said, "You are quiet inside." Chris blinked. "Quiet inside?" Zeri nodded. "Others, loud, full of fear or anger. You, calm." He didn't know how to respond. He never thought of himself as calm. He had bad days, doubts, worries, but maybe to her, he was different. Very. Feel energy, she added slowly, using more English than usual. Not words, not faces. We feel how others are. And I made you feel safe. He asked. She looked at him. Eyes soft. Yes. Chris gave a small smile and looked back at the stars. Well, that's good to know. After a moment, Zeri leaned her head gently on his shoulder. He didn't move away. They just sat together in silence, watching the stars move slowly past. But not everything on the station was peaceful. That week, strange things began to happen. Small malfunctions started appearing. Power flickered in the labs. Doors stuck open or refused to unlock. Equipment readings showed errors with no clear cause. At first, the crew thought it was just aging systems. But the station wasn't that old, and these problems didn't follow any pattern. One morning, the communication system went down for 3 hours. The chief technician was furious. Nobody could figure out what caused it. Chris helped check the main wiring systems. He crawled through narrow tunnels, checked panels, and ran tests. Everything looked normal until he found something strange. Behind one panel near the backup core, there were extra wires. Not standard wires, thin, black cables that didn't match any station design. They were hidden behind insulation foam. He called the head of engineering, but by the time they returned, the wires were gone. Are you sure you saw them? The officer asked. Yes, Chris said firmly. I touched them. The officer frowned. Maybe you were tired. Chris knew what he saw. Someone was tampering with the systems. That night, when he returned to his pod, he looked more serious than usual. Zeri noticed. She tilted her head, watching him. Bad? She asked softly. Double quotes. Yeah. He said, sitting down. Something's wrong on the station. Someone's hiding something. Zeri reached into the small pouch she always carried and pulled out a round crystal darker than the first one. She placed it in his hand. This one pulsed red, slow and deep. What is this? He asked. Danger, she said. Chris looked into her eyes. You knew. She nodded. I feel change. Not from people, from place. Chris stared at the crystal. You should tell command. Zeri shook her head. They don't feel. They wait for proof. By then, too late. What should we do? She looked at him, serious now. We watch. We listen. And when it comes, we stop it, together. Chris didn't know what scared him more, that something bad was coming, or that she already knew how to face it. Chris couldn't sleep that night. Zaire was beside him. Calm as always. Her breathing was steady, and her faint glow lit the small pod softly. But Chris lay awake, staring at the ceiling, holding the red crystal she had given him. Danger, she had said. He believed her. Something was wrong on the station. The strange wires, the system errors, the communication blackout, it all pointed to something planned, not random. And Zeri could feel it in ways no human could. The next day, Chris asked for access to older system records. He told his supervisor he was checking for power drift. It was partly true, but he was looking for patterns, anything that showed when or where these malfunctions had started. Zaire sat near him, silent. Her eyes followed the screens closely. There, she said, pointing. Chris zoomed in on a day 2 weeks ago. The same day the VR arrived. You think it started when your ship docked? He asked. She shook her head. Not my ship. Something else. Hidden. Small. They kept searching. Chris found something odd in an extra log entry. Not a ship, but a small object had entered through the cargo bay around that same time. A drone? A container? The file didn't say. He reported it, but the officer on duty waved it off. Must have been a supply pod. Nothing to worry about. Chris didn't argue, but deep inside, he felt something twist. Later that day, while checking vents near the power hub, he found another strange cable, again black, again hidden. But this time, Zeri was with him. It listens, she whispered. What? The wire. It listens. Not normal. Chris leaned closer. Sure enough, the cable had a tiny receiver attached, tucked into the panel. Not a bomb. Not a tracker. Listener. Someone was spying. That night, as they lay in the pod, Chris whispered, We need to do more. We can't just wait for them to strike. Zeri opened her eyes and stared at him quietly. Then she reached into her pouch and pulled out a folded piece of alien cloth. Inside was a glowing tablet filled with symbols. What's that? Old VR map, she said. Energy pops, feelings stored in place. Chris looked at her, confused. Feelings stored in places? She nodded. VR leaves signs behind. Memory not in words, in air. In stone, in space. She pressed her hand to the tablet, and the symbols changed. Then she pointed to a blank part of the station blueprint. Here, she said. There's nothing there. Chris replied. Not on your maps, she said. But there's something. The next day, they went together to that part of the station. It was an unused storage level. Lights were dim. The doors creaked. Most of the crates were empty or untouched. Chris checked the wall panels. At first, everything seemed normal. Then Zeri stepped forward and placed her hand on a plain metal wall. Her markings glowed brighter. Here, she said softly. Chris looked closely. There was a thin line in the wall, almost invisible. He pulled out a tool and gently slid it into the gap. With a soft click, the panel moved. Behind it was a narrow space. Inside wires, black ones, coiled around strange devices with blinking lights. Not human tech, not VR either. Someone built this here, Chris said. Shocked. Zeri touched the edge of the device and pulled her hand back quickly. Dark pulse, not natural. They took pictures, recorded readings, then carefully closed the panel and left back in the lab. Chris wrote a report and sent it to the station chief. But hours passed. No reply. Why aren't they responding? Chris asked. Zeri didn't answer. Instead, she pointed to the screen. The report had been marked read, but not forwarded. Someone had seen it and blocked it. That evening, the hallway lights flickered. The gravity trembled for a moment. Emergency alarms buzzed, then went silent. Chris and Zeri met outside the pod room. They know we saw, he said. Zeri single quotes. S eyes narrowed. It begins. They headed to the command deck. But halfway there, a blast shook the station. The lights went out. Red emergency glow filled the corridors. Crew members shouted. Warning messages flashed across every wall. Z-level power breach. Critical systems failing. Zeri turned to Chris. We go back. The place with wires. What? Why? We? Stop it. From their double quotes. Chris didn't argue. They ran together through the smoky hallway. They didn't know who was behind this or why. But they knew one thing. The danger wasn't just coming anymore. It was already here. Chris and Zeri moved fast through the red-lit hallways. Emergency. Lights blinked above their heads, and the floor trembled with each passing minute. The station was breaking down, and time was running out. They hit the power core, Chris said, checking his small datapad. If we don't stop it, life support will fail. Zeri didn't speak. Her eyes were focused, glowing faintly as she ran beside him. She knew the way without needing to look. Her steps were quiet but sure. Chris followed, trusting her completely. Now, they reached the storage level where they had found the hidden panel earlier. The door was jammed halfway, but Chris forced it open. Smoke hung in the air. Faint clicking sounds came from inside the walls. Zaire placed her hand on the same panel. Her glow grew stronger. They left more, she said. Chris pulled the panel off quickly. This time, he found not just wires but a control device. A blinking screen showed countdown numbers in alien script. He couldn't read them, but he understood one thing. It was a timer. This is going to trigger something. He said, maybe another explosion. Zeri pulled out her glowing stone and pressed it against the screen. The colors flickered, then stopped. The countdown froze. You stopped it? Chris asked, paused. She answered, not broken yet. They heard footsteps behind them. Chris spun around. In the smoke, a shadow moved. It was tall, armored, and silent. Who's there? Chris shouted. A voice answered, not human, not familiar. It spoke through a voice modulator. You should not be here. Zeri stepped in front of Chris. Her arms raised. Her body glowed brighter now, the symbols on her skin pulsing with energy. You brought this danger, she said to the figure. The intruder didn't answer. Instead, it stepped forward and pulled out a weapon. Chris's heart jumped. Back up, he yelled, pulling Zeri with him. But she didn't move. The weapon aimed at them. But before it fired, the lights above burst into sparks. Zeri's body gave off a flash of blue light that filled the small space. The attacker stumbled, covering its face. Chris used the moment. He grabbed a pipe from the floor and swung it at the figure's arm. The weapon dropped. Chris kicked it away. The attacker hissed and ran, disappearing into the hallway smoke. Chris breathed hard, chest rising and falling. What was that? Zeri picked up the fallen device. Not from this station, she said. Not even from this sector. Outsider. Spy? She nodded. Wanted our data. Wanted control. They turned back to the hidden panel. The timer was still paused. Chris studied the controls. We need to shut this down fully, he said. But I don't understand the language. Zeri placed her hand on the console. Her eyes closed. This is old language, she said. Dangerous. Made to break systems. Can you stop it? She nodded. But I need help. What kind of help? You're calm. Chris blinked. My what? She took his hand and placed it over her glowing crystal. You stay calm. Your thoughts, steady. I use that to guide the break. He didn't understand how it worked, but he trusted her. He nodded. I'm ready. She closed her eyes again. Her body glowed brighter. The console responded. Lights flickered. Wires sparked, then slowly dimmed. Chris focused on breathing slowly. No panic, just calm. The red lights around them began to fade. The alarm stopped. I opened her eyes. It's done. We stopped it? Chris asked. Yes. The core is safe. Systems are recovering, Chris leaned back against the wall. I thought we were going to lose everything. Zeri gave a small smile. Not while I'm with you. The station slowly returned to normal. Crew members repaired damaged panels. Systems rebooted. Life support stabilized. Command found signs of sabotage, but the attacker was gone. No one knew how they entered or where they escaped to. But Chris knew the truth, and so did Zai. In the days that followed, Chris became a quiet hero. He didn't tell the full story. He only said, we fixed it together, every night. Zeri still entered his pod without asking. And now, Chris didn't mind. He left the space open. Because now he knew she didn't come there to take something from him. She came to protect him. And he felt safer with her there than he ever had alone. The station was calm again. But something had changed. The crew moved with more caution. Guards were posted near the core room. Access was tighter. Even the air felt heavier, like everyone was still holding their breath. Chris tried to return to his usual work, but his mind kept going back to the attack, to the countdown, and to the way Zeri had stepped in front of him without hesitation. She could have been hurt. That thought stayed with him. He sat in the maintenance lab that afternoon, fixing a broken coolant valve. Zeri was across from him, silently arranging tools, but her eyes kept watching him. Are you all right? She asked. It surprised him. She didn't usually speak unless something was important. Yeah, he said. Just thinking. You are not calm inside. He looked up, meeting her glowing eyes. You said I was always calm. Before, she replied. Now, you carry fear. He put the tool down. I almost lost you. Zeri blinked slowly. But you did not. I know, he said softly. But what if next time we're not lucky? She tilted her head. Then we fight again, together. Chris gave a small smile, but it faded quickly. He knew something else was bothering him, something deeper. You said Veari feel energy, not words. He said .zai or I nodded. Then what does it mean when you sleep beside someone every night? Zeri paused. She stood still for a moment, thinking. Then she sat down beside him and placed her hand gently on the table between them. Veari choose sleep when we feel safe, she said. But sharing sleep means more. It is not just safety, Chris. Listen closely, not interrupting. It means trust, closeness, no fear between hearts. He lowered his eyes. So this isn't just friendship. Zeri shook her head. No, more than that. He was quiet for a long time. Then he asked, did you ever sleep beside anyone before me? Her answer came softly. Never. His chest felt tight. He wasn't sure what to say. He hadn't expected this. I never had anyone like you before. He said truthfully, you don't talk much, but I feel like I understand you more than people I've known for years. Zeri touched his hand gently. Veari do not use many words. We feel. You feel with us. That is rare for a human. He looked at her hand resting over his. Do you think this connection is just because we stopped the danger together? She shook her head again. No, I chose you before danger. Remember? He did remember. The first night she climbed into his pod without asking. When she didn't know him well but still chose him. Not because of what he could do, just because of what she felt from him. You feel quiet. She repeated, and my heart feels quiet near you. He closed his eyes for a moment. Then he nodded. Mine too. That night, when they entered the sleeping pod, something was different. Not in the way she lay beside him still calm, still silent, but in the way their hands met between them, fingers brushing gently. Not by accident this time. It wasn't confusing anymore. It was simple. They were no longer just strangers sharing space. There was something else now. In the middle of the night, Chris woke suddenly. A strange sound echoed through the hallway. Not an alarm. Not footsteps. A hum. Low. Strange. Zeri opened her eyes immediately. What is that? He whispered. She sat up. Not from the station. They both got out of the pod and stepped into the hallway. The lights were dim, but the hum grew louder. Zair I held her crystal close. Another signal. From the same group, Chris asked. Yes. Testing the shield systems. Chris clenched his fists. They're coming back soon, she said. But not tonight. Why test again? To see if we are ready. Chris looked at her. Are we? Zeri nodded slowly. We are stronger now. You believe. That makes us ready. He looked down the hallway, where the humming had faded into silence. They were not finished yet. But this time, they weren't alone. The days after the new warning passed slowly. The station was quieter now, but Chris could feel the tension under the calm. Everyone waited for the next attack, the next signal. Zair I stayed close. Her presence a steady light in the darkness. She no longer needed to climb into his pod to share sleep. Now, they sat side by side, talking in soft whispers about the station, the stars, and strange feelings. One evening, Chris was repairing a control panel when the alarm blared suddenly. Red lights flashed, emergency warnings filled the halls. Attack! A voice shouted over the intercom. Zair I grabbed Chris's arm. We must move. They ran toward the core room, where the station's main systems were kept. The hallways were crowded with crew rushing to their posts. Sparks flew from broken wires. Smoke curled from vents. When they reached the core, the attacker was there waiting. It was the same figure Chris had faced before. This time, more aggressive, more dangerous. The attacker raised a weapon and fired. Zair I moved fast, stepping in front of Chris. A shield of blue light flared from her hands, blocking the blast. The force pushed her back, but she stood firm. Chris felt his heart race. He grabbed a nearby pipe and swung it at the attacker. The figure dodged easily, striking back with quick Punches. Zaira glowed brighter now. Energy pulsed from her skin like waves of light. She whispered strange words in her language. The air around them seemed to hum with power. Chris saw the attacker falter. Zairi's light was growing stronger. He joined in, pressing buttons on the control panel to activate the station's defense systems. Alarms sounded. Turrets activated. Beams of light scanned the corridors. The attacker tried to retreat but was trapped. With one final burst of light, Zairi sent a pulse that knocked the attacker down. Chris rushed forward. The attacker lay unconscious, weapon lost in the smoke. "Are you okay?" he asked Zairi. She smiled weakly. "I am." Chris reached out to steady her. Her skin was warm, but there was a small cut on her arm. He tore a strip of cloth and gently wrapped it. "Thank you," she said softly. "No," Chris replied, "thank you." The station slowly returned to calm. Repairs began immediately. The attacker was taken into custody, but Chris knew the danger wasn't over. It never would be. He looked at Zairi, her glowing skin now soft in the light of the repair bay. "Why did you protect me like that?" he asked. She looked into his eyes. "Because you are my chosen, my safe place." His heart felt full. "And you are mine," he said. That night, Chris opened the pod door and saw Zairi waiting. This time, she smiled before climbing in. He didn't say a word. He just held her close. And finally, after all the fear, all the danger, all the strange beginnings, Chris fell asleep. With no fear. With peace. And with her by his side.